What's up, my man? How you doing?
We're good to go.
Ready to rock, yeah? Are we
Yeah.
rolling? Fantastic. See, that sounded really perfect. I just wanted to say that, because I hear a bit Joe Rogan's guests say it, are we rolling? And it
Are we
just
rolling?
It sounds cool, doesn't it?
Yes. We need a young Jamie, though.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. But it's nice to do one of these podcasts in person. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just for the audience, obviously, we mentioned last time, right? We know each other for a while. Mm-hmm. When I moved to Oz, just a quick recap. Sean took me under his wing, Big Sean. You know what I'm saying? Like I said to you,
how long did we live together for?
Oh, it was too long.
You're telling me.
You kicked me out, mate. You remember? You were like, you give me like 1 week's notice. You're like, oh yeah, by the way, someone's moving out, bro. I was homeless and stuff, man.
Oh, please. You haven't held on to that, have you?
How you been, man? Anyway,
I'm good. I can't complain.
Awesome,
complain.
Man.
Life's
awesome.
good. Yeah.
Looking small. When I was stood outside, then honestly, I was thinking, like, you're the only person that makes me feel like really skinny, like genuinely. I'm like looking, not genuinely. I'm looking at like I haven't got the dysmorphia as much now.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at my biceps and that, and I'm like, I was thinking about carbs. I was like, maybe you should bump your carbs back up. Honestly,
get more filled out. Yeah.
100%, man. But no, a lot's been going on, man, since we last spoke with your simplified strength tour coming up, mate.
Yes,
traveling the world and shit, man.
I
want to say as well, man. I've got to give you your credit as well because when I moved over here and stuff like that, for example, on your Instagram, you had like 200 followers. Now you got like 180,000. You're traveling doing what you love. Now you're going to do this. Tell the audience a bit more about the simplified strength webinars you're doing. Seminars.
Yeah. So for a while. Thank you for the intro, by the way.
That was
very complimentary. It was good. It was solid. I needed one. It's something that sort of organically developed, right? The coaching style in which I have developed face to face with clients was always one of a presenting type role. I was doing it in a theatrical, for lack of a better word, way, trying to get someone's attention, trying to educate someone in a field in which they pretty much have very little interest in. They don't care about how to move or how to lift weights. They care about the results. Well, I need them to care about the process because most of the work they'll do is when I'm not there, right? So I naturally created a coaching style which was performative, if you will, and that's who I am. And one thing led to another. I saw an opening, if you will, as like, I was saying an opening. I just didn't put barriers on myself in respect to not allowing myself to think that I could be the type of coach that went around coaching other people how to be either better coaches. A lot of the people attending my seminars are coaches, or just be pigeonholed into working in one geographical location. Where I might live, that's where I'm going to work. And sort of influenced by some people around me, and they were doing these sort of things and had been doing so for a while. And well, I know them, and they're no different to me. They've got a particular skill set, and why can't I do that? So I took sort of the performative nature of my my coaching style on the road last year. Did a few spots. Well, I did one seminar here in Australia, and then a couple in Canada, a few in the UK, and with the plan to set myself up with the content created from those seminars and a longer lead-up time in this Northern Hemisphere summer to do the same thing again. And I now have 10 lined up across July and August, starting in New Zealand in a couple of weeks, and then on to Canada and the UK across 5 weeks. So across 5 weeks? Yeah. Across, I think, a 5-week period, I have 7 seminars. Yeah.
I thought you were speaking to your manager or something out there then. You were looking across. I'm like, this guy just put on an act here for the camera, just asking your manager, is it 5? Is it 5 or 6?
Man, I need to find... There's so much going on in my head at any given time. There's so much competition for space and attention. If I'm talking to someone, I find it hard to maintain eye contact, but I really need to kind of just, if I'm looking off and I lose eye contact, it's just, I'm basically trying to access parts of my brain where that information is.
You brought someone with you then. I was like, I just sneak them in.
Yeah. I just
What's he speaking to out there?
Go a bit special. You know what I mean? Like, it's in there somewhere. I need to get it. Okay, there it is. There's the information.
Mate, that's awesome though. You get to like travel the world and stuff, and dope countries as well, right? Like New Zealand, Canada. It's not so much the UK, but no. UK's
like
dope as well. I'm only messing, mate. It's awesome. And hopefully you'll catch the heat wave, because last year I went back home for like the first time in 3 years. Mm-hmm. Bro, they had a heat wave. It was insane, the weather, man.
I got over there, just after that.
So it must have been like August or September, maybe.
No. It was still hot, but I think I got the tail end of that, right?
Yeah.
So it was August. Sorry, it was August. Yes,
it would have been August, because it calmed down a bit when I left in August.
Because I remember, I think I was in Canada or just before I left on the trip. There was like 40-degree days in London or whatever, and because no one has air conditioning over there, and
100%,
everyone was fucked.
Mate, it's brutal. Yeah, the thing is, it's funny because in the UK we've got this mentality where we just like to whinge. You know what I'm saying? So it's cold all year round, or it's raining, and then we're complaining. The weather's terrible, and it gets really hot, and then everyone's like, it's too warm. You know what I mean? Like no aircon and stuff. Don't know where that voice came from then. No. But what do you think? I don't know where that came from. What do you think of the UK? What do you like the most about the UK? I'm curious, and what parts of the UK stand out to you the most?
I really liked, a number of things. I really liked the fitness industry over there compared to here, in Australia. So my experience of the fitness industry there was, it was a lot more tight knit. It was a lot more supportive. It was less of a tall poppy syndrome trying to tear people down. At least that was my experience. Versus it was less cliquey. Whereas I find that in Australia, and it's probably no doubt due to the size difference and population density of the two areas.
It's crazy because the UK is like 70 million almost.
Yeah,
right?
so
it's like tiny compared to Australia. It's not even the size of New South Wales.
You've got no, exactly right. So you've got this tiny landmass with a fuck ton of people, and then you've got Australia with a huge landmass,
30 million people or something.
Not even, I don't think.
Not even that.
And so you've got sort of cliques in, like, you've got the Gold Coast, and then you've got like Sydney. You might have like Melbourne.
I think 70% of people live on the East Coast, don't they? I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
or like maybe even Melbourne and Sydney or something like that.
I think
it's
on the East Coast. Some sort of absurd stat. If we had a Jamie, we could pull it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like 95% of the.
Have to hire him for the next one. Just in case anyone doesn't know, Jamie is Joe Rogan's assistant. Anyway, it's an inside joke, right?
Oh, if you don't watch Joe Rogan, you're probably not
half
going
the audience.
Probably not going to watch this.
So I mean, come on, yeah, exactly.
I think it's like 95% of the Australian population live on like 5% of the land, or something right. Absurd like that, right? But because of that, because people are living in cities so spread apart, you've got sort of cliques, and unfortunately there is my experience. It's especially say from a seminar presenting standpoint, there's a lot less humility amongst a lot of coaches and younger trainers and whatnot here. Because if you're going to see someone at a seminar, unless they're a huge name, you don't want to be basically seen as lesser than. Because I'm like, well, if I'm going to pay to see a seminar by this person, and that by default suggests that I'm not as good as that person. It's like, well, no, that's not the conversation. That person just has a different experience, a different set of skills in which you can learn from. And it doesn't make you lesser than. Whereas I think in the UK, that wasn't the vibe, especially with the uptick and the response that I got from the seminars that I got there, and just the general sort of cachet of attendees that would have come to the seminars. There were people just as experienced as I was, but they just saw value in what I could provide, and just to add to what they already know. So they were more humble in that respect, right? So it was the people in the fitness industry that I really liked, and sort of drawn me back there. But I was very fortunate, as you mentioned, the weather, that when I was there, it was nice and warm. It wasn't uncomfortably hot, and not that I'm not unfamiliar with that, but it was also a time where, I was 33 at the time, 34 now. It was the first time that I travelled solo, and that was part of it. Quite a longer trip that I travelled by myself for the first time. So that independence at a mature age, that I can appreciate, and I'm much more attuned to myself, at 33 than I was, say, at 23, or even, say, 27 or anything like that, or even 30. And so being over there by myself, for the first time, it was the first time I'd been there as well. So experiencing that for the first time, being an independent person, with the reason that I'm over there. So my whole experience was so positively influenced by so many aspects.
And it's the culture as well, right? Because I think that's like one thing they're almost like missing in Australia. in the UK, we've got so much culture, so much history. Like some of the pubs and stuff, for example, have been there for like thousands of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like the oldest pub you'll find here is like probably 1920s or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the lifestyle, man, because I had a moment the other day where I was in the ocean in Bondi, and I was just like, if I could, like, when I was living in the UK before I moved there, if I could just fast forward now and look at where I'm at 6 years later, you know what I mean? Like, living this lifestyle. Because it's a great place, but living there is different, right? Because it's like the weather, it's the whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not, the quality of life is just not as good there, in my opinion. Obviously, the weather plays a huge part in that.
For sure. And it's something, it's a place like the UK, it's like many places, right? Like,
no one goes back there, do they? When you come from the UK,
it's a one-way street.
It's a one-way street,
yeah.
100%.
So, like, there are many places in the world that I really enjoy going to, and I like going back to, and I will continue to do so. But do I want to live there? No. Like, obviously, I was fortunate enough to be born and raised in Sydney, but I've also been equally fortunate to be able to travel a lot in my adulthood, and I just prioritize that in my life, right? So holidays and now sort of more working trips and whatnot. And so being exposed to lots of different places, and I've had the question a number of times online, where else in the world would you live if you could, or things like that. I'm like, well, if I wanted to live somewhere else, I would, but there's nowhere else I'd want to live, just because it ticks, obviously very biased, but it ticks all the boxes that I need and want. And I've tossed up things like living in Bali. I like going to Bali for an extended period. I was just there for a month a few months ago, and I spent 2 months there last year, 1 month at a time, beginning and the end of the year. But again, they say there's no place like home, but I'd rather be there. Otherwise, I'd live somewhere else.
100%, man, 100%. I saw you went to Bali recently with your new girl, Molly. Yeah.
Yes.
So you're a mark man as well now, yeah.
Mate, I'm off the market.
Out of the game, yeah.
Off the market, yes. No, it was very good. It'd been a long time coming. Molly and I'd been seeing each other for on and off for about 12 months, and all my 20s. So I'd spent all but 6 months of my 20s in 2 long-term relationships. So it was only 6 months between those two. I got started the first one when I was 19, and the second one ended when I was 30. And so there was only 6 months, and it wasn't in a long-term relationship, right? And so most of that time was living with a partner. And so
okay, this might be a deep question. Did COVID play any part in that or not?
No. This was post-COVID.
Oh,
you mean in terms of why it ended?
Yeah. No, I'm just you don't have to go deep into it. I'm just curious because I know a lot of relationships. A lot of relationships like kind of failed the strength test. In COVID,
like, it probably would have played a role. Yeah. Like you'd be ignorant to say it didn't play a role. But it was something that we'd met each other at a time that we were both coming out of something. We met each other, and it seemed right, and it felt like an opportunity missed if I didn't have a go, and I was glad I did. We both grew a lot having spent time together, and then when push came to shove, I didn't have the balls to sort of end it. I knew in my heart that it had run its course. She called it after about 4.5 years or so. It was very tough, but I even thanked her for it, because it was something that, I'd ended my previous relationship, and that was one of the toughest days, if not the toughest day of my life, in order to do that, because the hurt that it created, because I was dishonest with myself for so long, telling myself that, everything was okay, and I should have ended that previous relationship long before I did, right? So, I found it very hard to then try to do that to someone else and myself, so I was living in denial to the fact that relationship should have ended prior before it did.
Full transparency, I've done that as well, because I've spent probably around about like 11 years. I'm 35 now, so I had my first long-term relationship when I was like 19, 20 for like 3 years. Then I had another 2-year stint, and then it was what was it after that? Then it was like 3 years. Yeah, so it's like I don't know how long it is. I've lost count now. Something like 11 years or something. But it's the same thing that I've done like once or twice in relationships, where you just kind of go along like you lie to yourself, and everyone knows what the answer is, don't they? Yeah. Deep down, but you stay in that comfort zone. But you learn from that then. Yeah. You learn, so you go, okay, and we were both young, right? In our defense, so it's like you learn, then you go, right, okay, I'm not going to do that to anyone else again. I'm not going to go against what my intuition is telling me. So I mean, it's a traumatic thing, man. Going through a breakup, you know what I mean? It's a tough thing.
It's not nice, but at the same time, it's one of those things I think you need to go through, and you need to look at why did it happen, and you need to take ownership. Excuse me. You need to take ownership for any and all shortcomings that you were involved in order to be a better version of yourself moving forward for any potential partner that you may have. And one thing I said, and I've said this to Molly, and I've said this, to sort of other like friends or clients, and it sounds borderline narcissistic, but I'll explain sort of the perspective in which it comes from.
I know you're a narcissist.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
well, that's who I am. I'm just trying to suggest that I'm not. I said that whoever I end up with will be incredibly fortunate because I've put so much work into myself that I have, looked at my involvement in relationships that haven't worked and my involvement. And obviously I'm not completely, I'm not the only one responsible for why a relationship hasn't worked. It's a two-way street. But looked at what I could have done better. How do I improve and work on myself to be the best possible version of myself moving forward for any potential partner, to the point where whoever I end up with is going to be incredibly fortunate. And it sounds, it's a bit showboating, but it's only because this is the best version of me that's ever existed. So, and so it comes from
agree with that. I don't think it's showboating.
No,
I think it's fair though.
And I think
you have to do that deep work, then you have to work on yourself, and then you bring your best into a relationship. Otherwise, it's just setting yourself up for fail and setting someone else up for hurt then as well, right? Because then you're deflecting a lot of stuff you haven't worked on into the relationship.
Unless you have no degree of empathy whatsoever, you're going to feel.
Sounds about right.
You're going to feel maybe you're going to feel hurt if you're going to feel bad for hurting someone, right? And so why cause more pain and hurt on yourself if you have control on who you get involved with and to what capacity, the level of transparency you have, and if you. Like myself, I identified, things within myself, make sure I'm honest with myself and by extension of that, communicate better and more openly and honestly with anyone that I'm seeing. And if anything was to eventuate, all my cards are on the table and everything from the jump. And if things weren't to work out for any reason, it's never going to be nice in terms of what you're going to have to go through emotionally, but it's going to be the lowest possible point of discomfort and pain because you were communicative the whole time. You weren't lying to yourself. You weren't telling yourself, things will get better if you don't action them to get 100%. Better.
I had this chat with Janini recently, and luckily for me, she's worked on herself a lot as well. So she's actually moved through a similar process where she's taking the time to work on herself, to heal from previous traumas, from relationships and stuff like that. And then, my personal opinion is I think you need time on your own. I think when
100%.
you get when you have, and it's fantastic when you hear the stories about, childhood sweethearts and all that kind of stuff. And it does, Janini's parents, for example, they're a perfect example of that, but it's a different era we live in now, right? Modern day. But also it's just having that time to work on yourself and being on your own, being okay on your own, isn't it? I think is really, really fundamental.
I totally agree. But I think there's two sides of that coin. I think it's really important to have experience in relationships as well as experience.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Experience by yourself.
Yeah. Life experience, isn't it? I think life experience, in any area is normally going to be valuable as long as you're not treating people bad and
as long as you know how to look
destroying people in the process.
Yeah,
ideally.
You look at those experiences and unpack them the best you can and withdraw the positives, look at the negatives, what could I have done better, and improve upon those, right? And you need time by yourself to identify who you are, what you want out of life, what you want out of a partner, what your boundaries may be. But involved with that, you need to have experienced what it's like with someone, with maybe multiple partners over time, different girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever the case, whichever way you swing. So you can get a feel for what a healthy relationship feels like to
and
you.
What you like and what you don't like.
And what you don't like, what you won't accept and what you will accept, non-negotiables, what their boundaries are, and learning how to respect that. And if you only have one and not the other, I feel like your life experience and your ability to get fulfillment out of a relationship to the degree in which you possibly could won't
and also
be
seeing
as great.
The qualities for me as well. It's being able to see the qualities in a woman, in a good woman,
100%,
and also look for the red flag. I mean, we all have different things, different values, essentially, right? But you see now. I know, for example, obviously. Shouting out Janini again, you know what I mean? She's going to be listening back to this. She's going to be loving it.
Give her a rap if she deserves it.
I know. It's like you're just doing it for the podcast. But who's Janini? You haven't even told me about her off here. No, jokes. But I see the qualities in her, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, now fantastic. This is what I'm looking for right now in my life, and I have that awareness from previous relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Right?
Negatives.
So you can spend a long time by yourself and and that will teach you a lot, but it won't teach you your ability to identify those things in your partner if you haven't experienced either those equal positive qualities in someone else, but they might have had a few, negatives to go with it. And
speaking of negatives, how do you manage?
By all means, segue.
I mean, the quality is fantastic, right? But that's boring. Let's talk about the negatives, right?
Throw them at me. Let's go.
How do you manage? What's your partner like with PMS and stuff? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you manage that?
Like right now? Because
or potentially right now, or just in general. Like, I mean, how do you navigate, and what have you learned throughout the process? Because I've learned a lot about myself.
We'll get to you in a second.
It's a character building process.
It sure is.
Well, I was thinking yesterday, not to go off too much. I was thinking about I wonder what like a pregnant woman, right? Because a pregnant woman's going through a lot, right?
Oh, the hormones are fluctuating.
Yeah, I wonder what that's like in comparison to PMS. Anyway, continue. Just curious.
Well, I think it would be quite different, right? So, PMS is, I think
it's very different to having a baby.
But it's also very different individually, right? And for a lot of women, it can be very different month to month as well.
100%.
And so Molly, she at the moment, I'm hoping she isn't fucking pregnant. She's waiting for a period to come in, but she's got these. Oh, okay. Her PMS is like the worst it has been for since I've known her. And we'll say the worst. She's just a bit more moody, right? But at the same time, as I said, I've spent over 12 years of my adult life with in long-term relationships
with moody women.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so she is apologized in the past about how she might be, prior to a period and things like that. And I'm like, listen, this is a fucking walk in the park.
Again, going back to what you were saying.
But it's also it's ownership of these things as well, and I think it's a two-way street.
Just looking at what can you do better as well, and how can you react better, how can you manage that situation better. How can you be
more supportive and understand that at a time prior to their period, which we don't have to go through, fortunately enough.
We have no idea.
Well, the least, we don't have to deal with it. We don't have to deal with the period itself and the physical discomfort, the mood swings and how they view themselves differently.
Yeah, 100%.
And so the least, in my opinion, the least that we can do as guys, as partners, is to be
extremely patient,
as supportive. Well, yeah, to be more patient and supportive as possible, as long as they are owning, the fact that when you say something or the way they view something is going to be typically negatively skewed because of their hormonal flux at that time.
Because they're completely, because I always communicate this to my female clients, and they're literally two different physiologies.
For sure.
Different people when they're leading up to the menstruation, the menstruation, and then leading up to the ovulation and stuff like that. Two different people. But I've learned, for example, this week, Janine had it bad, PMS, and I learned a lot about myself because it's like one of those things where, as a guy, you want to be logical, don't you? We want to solve problems.
We're logical,
and I fall into this trap.
We're logical beings, and they're emotional beings.
Exactly. So sometimes you realize this is not just like something where you just solve the problem and stuff.
Yeah, it's not problem. It's not problem.
You've got to be
more.
It's solution. Yeah, you got to be more compassionate. Again, more patient. And I've just learned that obviously open communication is key, right? But
100%.
the way you say things as well, the way you deliver, especially with guys, we're very direct, right? We can just say direct, straight up.
Yeah.
This is what it is. Bang, crack on. Yeah. It's all good. It's either
you're a cunt.
You're a cunt. Get in the gym. You're fat. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it is. But with a female, it's the delivery.
100%
is so important, right? Yeah. And just listening to hearing them out. I know every now and then, just simply holding their hand and touching them, showing them that you care and showing them love, isn't it?
Sometimes it's important, and again, this is sort of one of the things that I've learned from relationships which haven't necessarily worked in the past, and positives drawn from those. They weren't all bad, you know what I mean? It's sort of like there's a lot of good in that, so you can extract the good. And so one of those was what you touched on. It's not always what you say, but how you say it that matters. And then you may say something that means very black and white what you think it means, and that doesn't really matter. It's how it lands. So you may say something to your partner that 3 out of the 4 weeks of the month land how you expect it to. She receives it and the way it was intended.
You go one day over that 3 weeks, Sean, and it's treacherous.
One of those, but on that other week where she's leading up to her period, where you'll say the same sort of thing. It might be off the cuff sort of comment. It's a bit of a joke, maybe at her expense, which she wouldn't care about typically. But then she's more sensitive to it, and it's like that's something you just got to be appreciative of. Because I look at it from the perspective of, thank Christ, I don't have to deal with that. And so, like, what do I have to do? I have to sort of like be a little bit more sensitive, in regards to what I say, and be a little bit more appreciative for what I say, because it's not about necessarily what I'm saying and the intention of what I'm saying. It's how may this be potentially misconstrued based on the position in which he's in now, which may seem like you have to think about it a lot, but if you've worked on yourself and you appreciate the context of the people you're talking to, or the one person, your partner that you're talking to, I think it's just an organic development of maturity. That you understand 100%. That, not to walk on eggshells, you shouldn't have to do that, but just to respect the fact that they're in a position that they're going to be more emotionally triggered by anything.
More sensitive, yeah.
Bro, absolutely.
Yeah. What are you breathing
anything.
So loud for?
Oh,
Judy's not like that. But
no,
I'm using examples of it. It's like
or like just like a video on just scrolling on Instagram, and it's like triggered by cute puppies more, or like whatever it might be on your feed, and it's sort of more emotionally triggered, and it's. It is what it is.
I've learned a lot about like childhood as well. Like for me, I didn't have a dad around and stuff, so my upbringing was like just chaos basically.
Sure.
I didn't have a father around, and then grew up around a lot of domestic violence. So my mum was in an abusive relationship, all that kind of stuff. And I had a bit of therapy, and I've come to realize like certain patterns now. It's like where I will get kind of like more anxiety and stuff like that if there's like an open loop, for example. Like if I don't quite know. What if she's kind of like maybe PMS, for example, right? And she's maybe not a bit more short of me, and because we don't live together at the moment, so it's like messages and they can come across the wrong way. So I have to like ring her up, and like I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening here now? And then I'll realize it creates like an open loop, and then I'll get anxiety, and a lot of stuff is like triggered from childhood, what I picked up on as well. So there's so much stuff. Though. Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah. There's so much stuff going on there, isn't there? But where did you actually meet Molly anyway? I'm curious.
Mate, she slid into my DMs.
Oh yeah,
yeah, with some pretty.
I sounded so Australian then. Oh yeah,
with some pretty average chat.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the first move?
Shit. She responded to, and she'll hate me talking about this. So hopefully she listens to it. And
that's right. I'm not going to edit it out, but
oh, good. No, don't. I there is nothing I would say behind her back. I wouldn't say to her face. Yeah. And worse. Oh,
great. That's the way to be.
Yeah, it's honest. And so. What did she say? She responded to a story, and it was, I think it was in regards to, I think I've just put there's a story of like a whole bunch of sushi plates. I just finished or something. And she said something about, what did she say? She said something about appetite or being able to eat a lot. And
smooth. Molly, smooth.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it says. And but it was more, no, well, it wasn't that. And I replied with, there's always room for more. With a cheeky like smile emoji. Yeah, no, like the cheeky sort of like
wink,
the cheeky.
Oh, you're a winker kind of guy with the emojis.
And
all right,
and
one of them creepy winkers, yeah.
And how she responded was, it was the beginning of 2020. It was January, I think. Yeah, January. And she responded with the motto of 2022, and I just like, what am I doing with that? Like there was no, I was like trying to be obvious that I was like taking the conversation, the start of the conversation in a direction, and she said the motto of 2022. So I just liked it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, because I've got a lot of followers, and I'll have people that'll just write random shit to a particular story or whatnot, and I don't immediately think this person is keen. I certainly. Looked on her profile and was attracted to her. So, one was hopeful, but at the same time, it wasn't a matter of like anyone that writes me something they're keen.
Exactly.
My head isn't that far up my ass. You
must have so many options, though, mate, with all those thousands of followers at the time. And I mean, Molly, you've done well. Sorry, mate, I couldn't help that.
No, she knows. And so that was nothing was said. Nothing was said for a little bit, maybe a week or something. And but I liked the way she looked, so I ended up following her just so I wouldn't lose her in the depths of the DMs. And she ended up commenting again on a particular story. I think it was my mum training in the garage in my gym. And, the conversation, the chat from there was much better. And so, 12 months later. She was very, very patient.
Smooth.
Very patient.
And then you moved in together, yeah?
I think she was about to pull the ripcord, I could tell.
Yeah.
It was a matter of...
And then you moved in then to salvage the relationship. Yeah, okay, right, let's move in together, right? Let's just solve that problem.
Well, as we were sort of talking about before we jumped on air, and like I mentioned before, I lived with partners for over a decade of my 20s. And so I was very comfortable, very familiar living with a partner. And I was in a position where I had a housemate at the time, a 2-bedroom apartment, and I needed someone else. And it was a sort of a serendipitous sort of situation where, do I get a new housemate and continue this sort of like on again, off again relationship with this girl who was increasingly meaning something to me, and or do I sort of like make a decision here? And I was overseas at the time, and I wasn't having as good of a time as I would like to have had. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy the company that I was with. It wasn't that I wasn't enjoying the location I was in. But it was, it got to the point where I'm like, there's something missing there. And it was the fact I was missing her. And so I gave her a call and basically said, I want to be with you. And it sounds a lot more romantic and sort of like significant than what I was.
I want to be with you.
Yeah,
Smooth,
I didn't say that particularly. I can't remember what I said. I was quite emotional.
Yeah.
Well,
Nice,
yeah,
and
basically I told her that I wanted her to move in because rather than perpetuating this sort of like this to and fro that we had going. And I wanted to sort of make a commitment to her, and it was
great. Brings you close together.
It was a greater decision, and for me, it was a matter of being able to see her more, and it was, and without having to try. You know what I mean? Because there's so much time I dedicate to myself, my business, and what I want out of life. I want to be able to see her more easily, knowing full well that I still have to try and still have to dedicate quality time when we're together and not be complacent with the fact that we see each other all the time.
That can be a thing as well, isn't it? Because when you live together, you can also then get complacent in terms of the quality of the time. Because it's the presence, isn't it? And that's what I think is a kind of valuable thing now with Janine and I. We're not living together at the moment. I'm sure we will soon. But basically...
No pressure.
I know. Now I've just dropped it now, right? But it's like that quality of time together then. It's like you're more mindful of being present. And it's almost like when I go back home to the UK.
Yeah.
It's like I go back and the quality of time and how much more aware and present you are because you know it's like a certain amount of... So sometimes, but you're right. That's a good point because you can get... But, sorry, Mick, one.
All I was going to sort of touch on there was the reason why... I even mentioned to her at the time, and it's something that we continue to make sure we work on, is to appreciate one another's time, be present with one another, and have enough time on a regular basis throughout each week that we are spending time with one another that is not just, gap filling. It's like, we're both here, let's go for a walk. So no, we're genuinely spending time with one another, and we're doing so with far more intention to spend quality time with one another. Because I've been in a relationship in the past because I was living with one another. You do get complacent, and you do think because you are spending time with one another that it is enough, and it's not.
No, it's
not. I wouldn't have made the commitment that I did and made the decision that I did, being very comfortable by myself and really enjoying that.
It's tough, man, because I've made some big errors lately almost where I've just been so caught up with work, that it's like, not really, making her as much of a priority in terms of like just simple things. Again, sometimes you've got to be a man of your word, and full transparency. I said something like, stay over every Friday or something, non-negotiable. I said that, and like, I never go against my word for the most part, but full transparency, I did. Then it was like a Friday daytime, and I was like, is it cool? Just in conversation, I was like, is it cool to stay over tomorrow instead? And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And then it wasn't, right? So it was like, but, and then I learned again from that. It's like, nah, you got to be a man of your word. You know what I mean? What you say, you've got to back up.
Yeah.
But I met her in the gym, man, Janine.
Who approached who?
I approached her.
Oh,
and
of
I was
course
like
you
a
did.
predator in the background.
Oh my goodness!
I was like a shark. Right? I saw her. I'm going to be fully transparent now. She was in the gym, and I walked in behind her in the gym. Right, so I come down the change room.
Of course you did.
Yeah, exactly. Like it wasn't timed enough. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't lurking in the shadows.
Were you trying to get her as a client initially?
No. I wasn't working in it. No. This is like a year ago. This is actually bang on a year ago, June the 25th.
Yeah, that's right. You weren't in. Yes.
Yeah. It was June the 25th. Last year. So
Yes,
like bang on a year ago, I met her, and I was in the gym, walked in behind her. I was like, oh, okay, she's fine. You know what I'm saying? She's got a great body, right? I'm just going to say how it is. She's fine, right?
She's great from the rear.
I didn't see her face initially.
I hope she looks great from the front.
Exactly. And then when I saw her from the front, then she was doing like, I was. This sounds really bad now.
She doing good kickbacks.
Who is this guy just stalking people in Fitness First Platinum? Everyone's going to be panicking now. But no, I saw her. She caught my eye. I was on the squat rack next to her, and man, I was just like, and then I saw her face. I thought, wow, she's pretty as well. Yeah. So I just went on my session, and then it's like nagging in your head. You're like, you got to speak. This is an opportunity here.
Yeah, of course.
For the whole, and then I was like taking my time in my session as well. It was like a 3-hour session.
Oh, God.
I was like, right, I'll do some calves at the end. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I
doing forearms?
Exactly.
Doing traps.
Doing neck on the cable machine.
Yeah,
like all random shit.
Well, anything that's within proximity of her that you can get some. Okay, how you going?
Just crying out for some eye contact.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I just happened to walk past her, and I just said hello, mate. And it wasn't like I haven't really got like a cheesy opening line or something. You know?
Oh, shut up! I bet
it was
you
like
do.
it was just like, hey, how you doing? And then it was like straight to the point. It was
Did you
like
just lift your shirt up and show your abs?
Yeah, I did. I got the abs out, and she was sold straight away.
Done.
Man. She was sold. Then that was it. That's the end of the story.
Here we are.
That's it. Done.
Yeah,
no, but I just said hello to her. What's your name? And then blah blah blah. And then
she gave you a fake name.
Initially, yeah, Beatrice. I was like, she look like a Beatrice.
Stephen.
yeah, exactly. And then then I was just like, straight in. What's your Instagram kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And then bang. And the rest is history, But
okay, that's great.
Yeah, man, that's my story about how I met. Even though he didn't ask for it, I just thought I'd share. I thought I'd just share that.
Well,
with
we're sharing stories.
with the
Why
audience.
not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not, man?
People like to sticky beak. They like to know what's up.
Exactly. I'm just blatantly looking down at my notes here, mate. Yeah.
Look, we've got a few notes here. We've got a few talking points. Nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
Otherwise, the conversation will just end up in chaos.
100%. But no, I wanted to ask you a kind of segue here is in terms of like relationships is. Brotherhood, right?
Uh-huh.
Just having this chat now for us in there, it's good just to shoot the shit as men. And I feel like it's so important, you know what I mean? And that I was saying to you, me, you, and Ian will get together, have a chat and stuff like that. Great. But it's so important, right? Surrounding yourself with obviously like-minded people, but I feel like as a guy, it's fundamental. Like, because my best mate lives in New York. He's also from Wales. I've got another close mate back home in the UK, and then Ian's a really close mate of mine here. But I haven't really got a great deal of friends here in the network. And I'm saying like really close mates. Obviously, I consider you a friend as well. But having that brotherhood is really important, right? And having people to shoot the shit with and guys to just have a laugh with, have conversations with.
Well, they say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and it's a very highly used adage, and it's very true though. And so you are so heavily influenced by who you spend time with, what their passions, drives, and goals are. You're going to be influenced by or lack thereof, and so and it's something that it's only become more present and more apparent to me as I've gotten older, and as I've gotten more sort of personally ambitious and driven and have goals and are able to achieve them and looking for further success and whatnot. And you sort of naturally gravitate. Well, you start to pull away from people in general in respect to needing more time to focus on what you want to do, what you need to do, and you just need to spend time by yourself in order to do so. And if and when you do spend time with people, this is my experience at least, you tend to draw towards people who have similar interests, similar drives, similar passions, or operating on the same wavelength or same frequency and moving along the same trajectory that you are. They may be further along that trajectory path because they may be doing whatever it is they may be doing for a longer period, but there's a kinship there, between people that are sort of operating on that frequency. And you take a lot from that. And so you're able to get not just a social outlet with these people like you could with anyone, Yeah, you get a social outlet with anyone, but you're able to get so much more because you share so much more. And I think it's not until you become a little bit older into sort of adulthood, you can't really get that. Even in, I really wouldn't call someone in there, and myself included, before 25 adulthood, really. Yeah. Even any 20s is questionable. And so it's not until you get a little bit older, you get a little bit more wise, and you maybe have a little bit more ambition, you've had a little bit of success, and you want a little bit more, and you learn that who you spend time with is so positively influential if it's the right people, and you just unintentionally find yourself drawn towards certain people. So if I'm only going to spend X amount of time not by myself working on whatever I might be working on, and I'm going to be much more choosy with who I spend time with, because I'm going to get a social outlet and scratch that social itch with absolutely anyone. I can talk to a brick wall. So it's like, well, what else can I get out of that time spent? How, and it's like, obviously with yourself, we get along really well, and we have for a long time and always have, and there's a similar energy there. There's a similar drive and ambition and passion that you share with someone, that it makes that social connection so much more rich, versus maybe someone that you're still friends with, or someone that you get along with, but maybe they don't have the same degree of ambition, that same drive, that same sort of energy. And, out of those two sort of options, those two hypothetical people, you're probably going to be drawn towards the person that has, that provides more fulfillment for your time.
And share similar values on a similar path. But also it's a fine balance, isn't it, right? It's a fine dance between you could spend too much time with people who are kind of like you're aspiring to almost be like, and it can be a bit too much then, right? So it's like having that balance. But yeah, I think just having like-minded people, especially as guys, right? For sure. To basically, it's like, even using Ian as an example as well, it's like almost look at him as almost like a mentor in some areas where he's helped me like with relationships and stuff like that. You know what I mean? What I've been in, because I don't know if you know this, but the average because loneliness is like a real thing now, right?
Yeah.
And the average person hasn't got like one person, not even one person. So I think over 50% of people hasn't got one person that they could call in times of, like trouble or whatever it is, someone they could turn to when shit hits the fan, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly, right. Man. So, I think valuing but another example is obesity.
Because I've got lots of people.
Yeah.
What can I say?
I got my mum. My mum will bail me out every time, man. You know what I'm saying?
Fuck, I tell you what, I'm a mama's boy. I'll be the first.
Hey, your mum will slap you about now. What your mum's deadlifting, man? I saw her pulling a. Like, what was it, like a 140? She was just pulling a nice 140 deadlift. Just little warm up, you know what I'm saying? Just getting the glutes fired up.
She's made of something different.
Bro, it's crazy how you can see the shape as well, like in terms of like how much she's changed, like in terms of her muscles.
I've seen she's mid-60s now, and I started training her a number of years ago, just as a means to show her enough movements and exercises that were sort of consistent with what she needed and what she wanted, and so she felt competent and confident enough to do them by herself, and that just developed. It was a great way, an easy way in which to spend time with her, and and she hit the ground running, and just genetic hyper responder. That's obviously, I used to give my dad. Sense, mate. I used to give my dad all the kudos for my genes and what I can do physically.
Okay, so your mum is the answer to this secret. Yeah?
I took them all back
to this unit I see before me.
I took all the adulation back from my dad, and then gave it towards my mum.
I definitely got my cotton bud legs from my mum, for sure.
Oh,
man.
really?
I got my chicken legs from my mum, so thanks, Mum. It took me 2 decades. And that's why I've got my joggers on today, man. I definitely wasn't going to wear shorts today. Stood next to Sean. I already feel like a skinny little, dweeb outside. But that's another thing as well, right, is being in shape, right? And when it comes to business, relationships, whatever, being in shape is not like how you look, right? It's fantastic, but really that's just a byproduct of your daily actions and decisions, right? It's a story of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I was chatting to someone recently, and it's like, well, a guy or girl, but as a guy especially, well, guy or woman, it goes both ways. But if we're talking about men now, just being in shape, you get more respect from people just naturally, because we judge a book by its cover. So this is not even like a male or female, just in general, whether you like it or not, we judge a book by its cover. It's like naturally when you look at someone in shape, you look at them and you're like, that person's got their shit together. You automatically think that, even though it might not necessarily be the case, but for the most part, they've got the discipline and the consistency with their training and probably nutrition in it as well.
Yeah.
So
hit the nail on the head, right? If you see someone who is, say, two versions of people, right, or or two people, and one is in good shape, and they're the clothes fit well where they should and loose where they should as well. And someone else who's clearly overweight and not in great health. It's a reflection of values, and it doesn't make either person better or worse than one another. But when it comes to like judging a book by their cover, we're all going to make assumptions on someone before we get the chance to know them. You've got to give people a chance to, because someone might be in great shape and might be a cunt.
Yeah, exactly. I've met loads of them. It goes the other way, man.
It does.
In the bodybuilding world, man, I met some of those people had the worst, I said, the worst eating disorders than I've seen in hundreds of clients and stuff that I've coached, So that can be deceiving as well.
For sure. But, it is. It's like, so if we talk about, like, going for a potential partner, right? If you or I have always sort of been into training, into exercise, and before that playing rugby and whatnot, and if you were to meet someone who, you said you met your partner at the gym, it's like, and Molly's a trainer as well, right? If I didn't, I couldn't be with someone who wasn't into fitness, and they don't have to be a trainer, but if they didn't have that those same values, that is fundamentally going to be a huge issue, because how I prioritize my time as a default, non-negotiable aspect of my life, which underpins how I operate on a day-to-day basis, is going to be so different to them, and they don't have to be experienced it, in the gym. They could be, very early on in their journey, but it's a matter of values, and if they don't align, whether it be someone as a partner or friends, you know what I mean? You'll find yourself, either pulling away from that person if they are a friend. Naturally, just you don't gravitate towards one another. Yeah.
It's crazy because you couldn't. It'd just be hard for us to be compatible with anyone. And then, look, this is not to look down on people and say, it's just everyone's got their own values, right? Their own value system,
of course.
And it's just a lifestyle, isn't it? Right? I feel like that's so important as well.
Yeah.
And I was saying to you off air, for me to find someone with a similar lifestyle to me is so hard, bro. You know what I'm saying? So I barely go out anymore, you know what I'm saying? Like, I enjoy just chilling, you know what I mean? And obviously my sleep routine,
more of a homebody in your old age.
More of a homebody in my old age, you know what I mean? So that stuff's really, really important. But it's basically a story of sacrifice, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's like I was thinking the other day with abs, for example, right? Like, why are abs so impressive, right? It's a story of sacrifice. It's like lines on a stomach, right? Like, why? It's a story of sacrifice, and it's a story of all the pizzas I said no to. You know what I'm saying?
When's the last
all
time?
All the pizzas you said yes to. Couldn't help that.
Mate, I was going to say, when's the last time you didn't have abdominals, like visible abdominals?
Now, mate, they're probably the best they've been.
Your midsection has always been quality. It's always been, very, very good. When's the last time?
It's like probably the best it's been now.
It's obviously you've had some ebbs and flows in terms of you've been a little bit more lax, But you said
you've always been visible, right? Yeah. But now they're like just popping all year round. I think that's more just a case of like, 'cause obviously I eat kind of carnivore now as well, so I have
maintenance as well. It's sort of like you found.
I don't even think about
that is like from a a genetic adaptation standpoint. We know that maintenance of any adaptation is far easier than progress.
100%.
Like, I don't have to try. It sounds, well, it is what it is. I don't have to try very hard to maintain the muscle mass and strength that I have, because I've established that homeostasis of that for quite a while. If I want to make further progress, it's going to be a fucking uphill battle. But I think for yourself, probably that's probably where you've established that.
Because you were lifting weights. I was like 16 when I first started lifting weights.
12 or 13 when I started. Yeah.
So for me, there we go. So for me, it's been almost 2 decades, the same as yourself, right? So I think it's all the time and effort. But now it's just more a case of just nutrition and lifestyle, because the training element is like always there anyway. Yeah. But now it's a case of like, obviously the way I eat now, it's just I don't have the desire at all for any more like processed foods anymore. It's like it's not even like real food to me, unless like dark chocolate. You can't really. That's not really ultra processed food, is it? You know what I'm saying? I don't have the desire for those foods anymore, and obviously because of the way I eat now, like animal based, it's like beef patties, and if I want like a treat, I'll have some cheese and stuff. Again, like that with no bread, that does it for me. You know what I mean? And I never feel like I'm deprived. So I think that's the main thing, and just having less. it's not like carbohydrates are going to make you fat. Like they don't. Overeating calories makes you gain fat.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So, and what I find with carbohydrates, they just tend to stimulate your appetite more, depending on the type of carbohydrates you're eating. But
100%.
I have virtually like my average carbs per day is probably like under 50 grams now. You know what I mean?
Mate,
So it's impossible to not be shredded. It's great.
I've had so many slices of bread and butter just today. Delicious.
And you're still on point as well. I'd be falling asleep, bro.
I don't know about that.
The conversation's flowing. I don't know how you can manage it.
There's no visible abs under the shirt, I'll tell you that much.
But no, just for the audience as well, it's like it's how you feel though, and then again it comes back to like health. It's because I feel better, I'm sharp. If I don't do low carb, I never think about abs, right? So the less I've thought about my physique, interestingly, the better I've looked. Don't get me wrong, there's still thought there when I'm training to work certain body parts or whatever. Yeah. But it's more about health. It's like I just train the full body because I want to make sure I get a good full body workout, mobility elements as well.
Well, that's what drew me towards strength training as a focus of coaching people versus going down any other particular path of personal training, is because so many people want to achieve physique goals. They want to be bigger or smaller or leaner or whatever the case may be, somewhere in between, some combination of all of the above. But fundamentally, they want to feel better about themselves. And there's a psychological driver behind that physical goal, that physical adaptation that they're looking to achieve. And if we focus more on how someone feels and more the performance side of things, you mentioned sort of like your abs are there without having to think about it, and with not necessarily training for that, but they're in great shape. It's like I found pretty early on that in order to make someone feel good about themselves, to achieve the goal they actually want to, and then look better, more bigger muscles and leaner where they want to be and all this sort of stuff, is focus on the statistical improvements that are sort of strength improvements, strength progress over time. You will, by default, as long as we take care of your diet to a degree, we make sure that you're progressing over time. You're just eating slightly better than you have before, and you'll end up looking better. You'll end up feeling better without focusing on it so much. Because you mentioned about eating disorders with people in the fitness industry and bodybuilding in particular, people on stage and people are actually competing. It's so prevalent. And obviously there's a fine line between providing someone with the skills and the education to eat the right things aligned with their goals, but not be obsessive about it that it becomes problematic. And so I think, getting the training right and making sure they're focusing on making progress in the gym, getting stronger, allow the programming itself to take care of the adaptation. But getting that balance just right between that focus and getting the nutrition right, giving them enough information that they're feeling empowered, but giving them enough slack that their potential eating disorder doesn't develop.
It can go the other way, but also it's crazy. There's research on it now. You just make better decisions, right? When you're training consistently, when you get stronger. And by the way, it's another bit of research as well, like self-worth. In fact, when you get physically stronger, it improves your self-worth. There's research just by getting physically stronger. 100%. But then making better decisions with food as well. There's research on that. You feel more.
You feel this, and this is again a push that I had with sort of incentivize me to go down that path as a coach. Is that you'd see that with a lot of people. A lot of people that say females would come to me in the past wanting to achieve a particular physique because you unpack and you understand what type of questions to ask, getting into the psychology of what's going on. And you find out that they just want to feel better about themselves. They don't feel as good as they'd like to for whatever reason. And all right, cool. Well, we know that changing a physique takes a long time, especially if they don't have a good competency in the gym. They don't have the habits to train. There's a lot of nutritional and lifestyle impacts that we need to address. So it's going to take a long time. But what we can see, measure, and be rewarded by on a much more short-term and consistent basis is getting stronger on a week-to-week basis.
It's very black and white, isn't it? That's the beauty of it.
And so if we focus more on that and someone goes from being able to only lift, say, a few kilos performing a particular exercise, and within a month or two they're performing, fourfold that, or, depending on how new they may be, or either performing, say, a deadlift, say a trap bar deadlift, they're much more, favorable for someone who, lower on the skill level. And so they can make progress significantly quickly. And so they'll see a big number, and they might get to like 100 kilos in, a reasonably short period of time, potentially. And that in itself starts to skew someone towards different goals, because that now makes them feel good. So they didn't achieve necessarily the physique goals that they thought they wanted, but they feel good, which is what they actually wanted to achieve. They wanted to feel good. They thought the vehicle to feeling good was a different physique, but the vehicle to feeling good was actually feeling stronger, feeling empowered. And you talk about fulfillment and feeling... just feeling a better sense of self, feeling better about themselves because they're feeling more capable, and especially instilling that in a lot of women that, for whatever reason, have maybe just being women, they feel that they aren't as physically capable as men potentially, or women typically tend to be, as a default, more. They don't back themselves the same degree as guys do when it comes to physical tasks. And even though they might be, just as competent from a skill standpoint and all things equated just as strong, but they won't back themselves to the same degree.
It's interesting you say that. Sorry to interrupt, but I used to train people who just came back to me then. I would train guys, and a lot of the times they'd be like, no, I can do more weight.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, we need to take the weight down.
Yeah,
like, improve your technique.
Your technique
Whereas
sucks.
women are a bit like, generally, they're a bit more
Yes.
like, and you're like, no, you can do another 20K. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
Or 10K.
They're just more
Cautious,
cautious, more
and smarter, basically.
Yeah, basically.
The male ego.
Yes, and so that's the thing, right? So you want an appropriate amount of ego to drive progress and drive enthusiasm, but it's a coach's job to wrangle that and make sure it's appropriately dosed. Otherwise, someone's going to fucking hurt themselves.
100%.
And I've had people in the past, and I'm sure you have as well, guys who have some degree of experience and think they're probably more advanced. Not probably, they think they're more advanced than they are, and would come and see me because I certainly look like I know what I'm talking about. And so they're like, oh, he's big and strong, and so he'll get me even bigger and stronger. And you'll see how they move. And I've had, I wouldn't call them clients.
Before you know it, you got them doing like 3 bodyweight squats.
Well, they're not
like session over.
I wouldn't even call them clients, because you look at what they're doing and you look at their programming. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to slash about 30% of your total programming because you're doing 6 days a week or 7 days a week, and that's far too much. You're not recovering well enough. And per day, you're doing way too much. And your technique sucks. So it's like you're making these massive slashes here and there, and they think that you're going to implement something which is going to make it harder. So no, I'm going to make it more effective. And the way in which we make it more effective is to do less, but do it better. And it's sort of like the head starts fucking, spinning backwards.
I just put a post out today on that. It's such a good point in terms of like treating, and you're the master for this, right? In terms of like treating each exercise like a skill, right?
It is.
People go in there like it's a workout. I've got to push hard. I've got to do loads of volume. As you say, snip 30% off that.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the skill of these fundamental movements like your squats, your deadlifts, etc. And when you're honing on the technique on those things and you go in the gym, because that's the way I look at it now. Like, you could look around the gym. It depends what I'm doing, but most of the time I'm not lifting heavy weights. But I'm doing it with such intention.
Yes.
That, you know what I'm saying? I don't care, man.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
It's the quality. You obviously want to, and you need to be pushing yourself to a certain intensity, load-wise, effort-wise, making sure we have adequate volume, across the week and whatnot. But if the quality isn't there, it's just an inefficient use of time. And that's fundamentally how I look at it. If we don't have that focus on what we're doing with our time, then you're pissing potential results away. Because I spent probably the first 10 to 12 years of my experience, my training journey, if you will, sort of, the first sort of year or two into my own personal training career, very inefficient. And it didn't realize it was being inefficient, but it was only in hindsight when I met the right people and became more enlightened and better educated as to a different perspective on training and movement and exercise and what actually gets results and why being efficient is so important, and programming and everything. And so it wasn't until I went through that process that I realized how misled or just generally inefficient I was in my process in the past, and got good results in spite of inefficiencies, just through a genetic, positive genetic response to these things, and seeing how common that is,
especially you're in your 20s, right? Well, you're young.
Especially, but it's for anyone that's a newbie, right?
Yeah, the newbie gains. There's nothing like newbie gains.
It's also, it's not just newbie gains from a standpoint of people being adaptive to a novel training stress when they're new to the game. It's also the methodologies used to give you a false sense of efficacy, right? So you'll do a particular program and move in a certain way when it comes to performing a given exercise that will reap a given result when you start, but you're at the start of your journey, you throw shit against the wall and everything's going to stick. And no longer after, that newbie phase will that same lack of quality in your movement, same lack of efficiency and quality in your methodologies of programming and whatnot be adequate to keep continuing to progress. That's when people go, oh, I did this program before and, that's always worked for me in the past. And it's like, it worked for you once, or maybe it worked for you twice.
No
over
shit,
time.
It worked for you because you went from probably doing nothing
to
doing that. So anything's going to work.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? To an extent.
Well, no, 100%. So people don't identify what actually works. But, it's things like squatting, deadlifting, pushing, pulling, rowing, pressing. These exercises will always have efficacy as long as we are adequately and appropriately critical for the technique and the programming associated based on where you are.
It's hard to exist. Sorry, mate. I was just going to say there's two things. There's the behaviors, right? That type A personality, which you were talking about then, right? The kind of person that's basically getting after it, doing loads of volume. I find, in a sense, those people are the hardest people to coach because they always want to do more. They want to go there, but they don't, because they haven't done it for long enough. They haven't really put the time enough into the skill of each movement and just scaled it right back.
Yeah,
and they have that thing where it's almost, I call them like cortisol junkies. I used to be this person, by the way, where you want that release of pushing yourself in the gym, but then you're not doing it the smart way.
Yeah.
And then also overcomplicating it as well.
Yeah.
It's like you just said then, the fundamental movements, if only people would just not overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
And focus on and it's hard though, it sounds easy, like try and do a good, you're doing a squat with perfect form, right? Like how much work do people have to do? Yeah. And I feel there's so much value, right, in just learning how to squat properly.
Of course.
Like that alone. The work that goes into that, right? So like you say, those fundamental movements, the rowing, the pushing.
Yeah.
If people could just factor those main movements in, like every week and try and practice them, you could do so little and get fantastic results, right?
Well, it comes down to, exactly right. So it comes down to people, and this is something that I used to do, right? So I've got a lot of patience and understanding for why people do what they do. People lack the ability to identify what it is that's actually holding them back from achieving the results that they aren't achieving. And it's not because they don't have the best programming in the world, because the best programming from the best coaches in the world mean fuck all if you move like shit. We can soundbite that one. People just don't. People will think that they don't have the best programming, or they don't have the tools in respect to unique exercises that they haven't heard of before, or something, right? But it's nothing. There's no secrets, right? It's just that the level of critique and that they're holding themselves to, or being held to by a particular coach, when it comes to their squat or their deadlift or their push or pull, whatever they might be doing, it just isn't enough for where they are. Right, they've progressed their squat, they've progressed their deadlift, or whatever the case may be, and their level of critique was fine to get them to where they are, but it's no longer fine moving forward, and all their programming isn't adequate as well. It's either not challenging enough based on their experience. They don't feel empowered enough to challenge themselves enough. That's a huge one as well. People don't feel confident enough to really push themselves hard enough, because certain people. You need to develop not just a skill set when it comes to how to move better, and increasingly so, and being increasingly critical, but increase your capacity to push yourself harder. So a 10 out of 10 difficult when you're new to the game will be very different, irrespective of load used. The 10 out of 10 difficult when you're new to the game will be very different as a feeling to what 10 out of 10 feels like, or it should be,
Such a good point.
5 years down the track. Because you're only able to push yourself to a certain degree and be like, oh my God, that's hard. All right, cool. Could you do any more? Gun to your head? Oh God, no. You know what I mean? And then you develop a level of grit.
It's a threshold.
Yeah. That upper threshold of what you can tolerate, that stress tolerance and that sort of eyeball popping sort of like capacity to push yourself into a set is something you need to develop over time. And a lot of people don't get that. And that's why a lot of people don't, they plateau, because the level of effort, the intensity of the effort they apply initially, when they're newer, will get a certain result. And so they don't actually look to develop that. They look for other exercises. They look for different programming. They blame other people. Or
again, because they get caught up so much on the physical progress as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you focus on strength, it's so black and white, right? That's a great, if you keep showing up and getting stronger and working on the mechanics.
Yeah.
What advice, just to kind of, I guess, wrap this up, bro, what advice would you give to anyone who, let's say they want to go to the gym, 3 times per week, and they want to maximize results they get, and not just physically, but with performance and strength? I know the answer is always going to be it depends. But if you're speaking to if you're speaking to the average person, what would you say are the fundamentals when it goes to going in the gym to maximize results? Whether that be most people have to focus on mobility, focus on single leg movements. I know it really depends, but just if you were to give a general kind of
technique,
advice.
Technique is king, right? Because the more efficient you are with your technique, the better you are with your technique, the safer you move, but also the more efficient you are with your time. And so we want to be achieving results in the quickest period of time possible. Now, that may be 2 years, but if something takes 2 years to achieve, we want it to take 2 years and not 3 or 4 or 5 or never. And that comes down to how every single repetition is executed. And over, say, that hypothetical 2-year period, you would have, this hypothetical person would need to perform thousands of repetitions of a given exercise, a whole bunch of other exercises, thousands of reps. Now, the only difference between achieving a stellar result in that 2-year period or achieving a mediocre result or a shitty result is going to be down to how each individual repetition is performed, right? Obviously, the programming matters, and that's something to discuss with a coach like me, to a lesser degree, Martin. As
shameless plug,
yeah, to create a direction that suits your goals, but it's your technique first and foremost that matters, because that single repetition, or out of context, one repetition doesn't matter, right? But contextually, over 2 years, where you're performing thousands of repetitions, that's when a small detail in your technique, good, bad, or otherwise, starts to really impact what you can achieve. Because if you're, if the most efficient you can be from a statistical standpoint on a repetition is to the value of 1.0, if you are being inefficient, it's 1.2 or 1.4. You know what I mean? It's there's a higher value per rep, right?
Got you.
And so if it's only a 1.05, all right, cool, that's not that bad. But if that spews out 1.1 or 1.2, and then, all right, still good rep. Right, still good. You haven't hurt yourself, and you still might be making progress. But you times that over, just the one set. Right, and then that 0.05 or that 0.1 starts to accumulate.
Compound interest.
Yeah, and you don't know what you could have achieved. You just won't get there because you worked harder. You overinvested effort to achieve. Say it was at 1.1. Right, I'll see how good my statistical sort of maths are.
Layman's terms.
So you just basically okay. I'll give you more layman's terms. If you work that little bit too hard per repetition, you're not going to notice it on that rep, right? Instead of working 1.0, you put in 1.1. All right. But you accumulate that for the entire set, for the multiple sets, across multiple exercises, across months, and say that 2 years. That's when that 0.1 or even fraction of that is multiplied into something of great significance. And that's the difference between a result that's achieved in 2 years or maybe 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And so, obviously, programming matters.
Yeah, but looking at you as an example, I know you're a genetic freak, right? We're going to give you that. But the fact that, what's your PB? It's more than 250, isn't it? Is it more than a 250 squats?
I went.
American audience, kilos, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking 500 odd pounds here. What is it?
Yeah, so I had a crack at 260 kilograms on Saturday last week, and I came a bee's dick close to getting that. If you're not familiar with how big a bee's dick is, it's pretty small. I haven't seen one personally, so I imagine they have one. It's going to be quite small. And so I came.
Stings though.
Hey, nice. I came very, very close, and I might not have a crack this weekend. It's one of those things. There's so many things which will impact performance. I've got to fuck around and find out. But before I go away on my trip in a few weeks, I definitely want to sort of tick that off. But that was only the third time I've ever had it on my back. The first time, the most previous time was in March, and the time before.
But that's the nervous system. That's the beauty with strength. It's a neurological thing now. So your nervous system already has felt that 260.
Yeah. So definitely, I do want to sort of maintain that sort of in that ballpark. So when I go for it, there's more familiarity there. So there's more greater potential to do so.
Awesome.
But the only way in which to get there and to maintain that is to be increasingly critical with the technique, and to the point where...
That's what I was going to ask you, using your analogy then.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically what you've done, right? It's the compound effect of
100%.
those fine-tuning. And I forgot to mention this, 4 a.m. in the morning, bro. Do you still do mobility at 4 a.m. in the morning? When I used to live with you, I used to get up in the morning, you see this big dude with his leg over his head, you know what I'm saying, with a leotard on. I'm like, what the hell? With that moustache as well.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. No, look, I really don't need to do a lot of mobility now because of the habits that I instituted around that time where we were living together. I was doing yoga. I was using a lot of what I learned in yoga and identifying shortcomings in my mobility to positively influence my training, and created a, like strength or muscularity for yourself, a homeostatic sort of level and capacity that I was able to maintain. So my hips, my ankles, my spine, as long as I maintain enough attention to them within the exercises I perform, and I do, enough. I do very little compared to what I used to, but because I've earned the right to do little. Does that make sense? So, and so it's the same thing with my weight training. I don't do a lot of heavy stuff, but it's because I have done so many years of heavy lifting that my tissues, my structures have created that homeostatic level that I can maintain a high level of capacity with a low volume and a low frequency of work, because my body has just been conditioned to it. Now, obviously, I need to maintain it to a degree in order to maintain it. But if I was to tell Joe Blow that, I only squat this many times per week or push or pull and this is the load, and they'd be like, oh, they couldn't do that and expect to lift those weights because I've been doing it for 20 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's very different.
Yeah, there's no shortcuts, man. So where can simplified strength? Are you ever going to plan on taking that to the US? Is that a goal of yours or not?
I wouldn't mind going to the US, but because the US is so spread out, and there are so many major cities, right? There's so many big cities,
of course.
And whereas like Canada, there's sort of went to Vancouver and Toronto last year and doing the same again, and one of the spots is Vancouver Island, Victoria, and there's just not as many major places. And even if I went to a couple other cities, there might be Edmonton, there might be Montreal, things like that, but there's only so many that may be applicable in terms of being enough of a geographical hub that people would be drawn towards, or have a big enough catchment area, right? And the UK, it's very dense. It's only so big, and I'm like, I'm going to fly into London and get a train get a train around, right? And so it's not too difficult there either. But the US, it's so expansive as a country, and it's a 5-hour flight, I think, from LA to New York, and so like that as an example.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, 50% of the audience from America. I was going to say if you ever go there, but I was going to say, where can simplified strength now? You got it in obviously UK. You're not doing any in Australia, are you? At the moment,
I will be doing some in Australia at the end of the year.
Okay, cool.
I've spoken to a guy online who has a gym in Brisbane, doing one there. At the end of the year, I'm just going to wait until I sort of get these ticked off, and then I'll sort of, probably in the next couple of months, look to sort of organise a date for that, and then probably that'll be sort of the first one because I've created that conversation, and then look to schedule one in Sydney. I still haven't done one in Sydney. I just go everywhere else in the world.
Yeah. But you get to travel them.
Yeah, and awesome. So do one in Sydney, and then in Melbourne as well.
Awesome. I was just going to say, so for the audience, if you want to learn how to lift properly and get maximum benefits, right, from strength training. Like, this is the shit, right?
Well, yeah, it's catered to both coaches and
coaches as well,
gym goers alike, right?
So you get primarily, all in all, you get more coaches than you would.
I do typically, okay. I do typically, and it's which is good for me. It wasn't something that I intended to do. It wasn't like, oh, this is just for coaches, for instance, because the information is the same. If I'm working with a coach to help develop their skill set to be a better coach, they're going to listen to and take on not just what's being presented, what the information is, but how it's being communicated. My strength as a coach is my communication skills and my ability to take an idea or a concept or a movement or a description on something and simplify it down, hence the name, simplify it down to a digestible and then much more easily applicable process. And that's fundamentally what the seminar is all about, just sort of simplifying things down to the point where, irrespective of who may walk through the door, who decides to purchase a ticket, they will get huge benefit from it, whether they're just applying it for themselves and they want to become more confident and more skilled up in what they're doing, or whether they are a coach who are looking to do the same thing with their own clients, learning the language that will be most easily understood, reducing the friction between explanation and application. Because if you can explain something more simply and get someone to be more confident quicker, it's everyone wins. So that's sort of fundamentally what I'm trying to get across in those seminars.
Awesome, man. So valuable for any coaches as well, right? Because that's the key thing. The art is the communication. And it's also just actually mastering all of the mechanics and everything else yourself. And literally fine-tuning things makes you better as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where can the audience find you, man?
Instagram would probably be the best place to find me, and all my links on there to...
I'll share all in the show notes anyway.
Thank you very much.
Everything.
All my seminars, as well as my online coaching, if you're interested in it, because, what can I say? I'm pretty amazing. So you'll have the links to all my seminars, links to my online coaching, links to my OnlyFans. Just joking.
No, you're not joking. I've seen what you're up to with that cowboy hat on that you wear.
What can
I've
I
seen you
say?
wearing that cowboy hat. I was thinking he's got to have an OF. I bet he's popping.
The requests have been there, but I've worked too long and hard. I couldn't give a shit, really.
Long and hard, yeah. No pun intended.
No pun very much intended. No, look, I've worked long and hard to try and create credibility in my name, and it's like, I could earn more money on OnlyFans, but it's like, I like, despite having questionable morals at times, it's something I hold myself to a higher level.
I think I should consider it, man. With the abs now, I'm in the shape of my life. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm in that. These are the golden years. So why not capitalize?
Yeah, fuck it. Yeah.
So you can find me
OnlyFans /mutton.
Hey, bro, thanks a lot for your time, man. It was great to catch up anyway.
Yeah, likewise.
Cheers, man.